Hello, and welcome to another edition of Data Dialogues. My name is Richard Harris. I'm the Commercial Director for Ignition. Joining me today is our Principal Architect, Nols Ebersohn. In addition to being our Principal Architect, Nols is also the trainer on Data Vault and runs the minimum, 10 to 12 classes a year on training people in Data Vault. The subject for today is conducting a data vault review. Um, Over the last few years, we found it very useful to help our clients understand where they're at in their data vault journey and to help them avoid any major pitfalls, identify opportunities for improvement within the data vault by conducting a data vault review. Those reviews in the main have been conducted by Noel, so we thought it would be a good opportunity today to pick his brains a little bit and get a bit of an understanding over what the review is and what are some of the key findings and so forth that he has found. Hello, Knowles. How are you today?
Hi, Richard, and thank you for the kind introduction. Data vault reviews are a favorite topic.
Excellent. Well, look, why don't we then start off with the most obvious question? What is the objective of a data vault review?
The data vault review is essentially giving you a health check on what your data vault environment, processes, methods, architectures are. And so, by virtue of giving you a health check on those elements, helps you to see how closely you're aligned to the standards that Data Vault 2 requires you to uh, implement. And those standards really are driven by the practicalities and the pitfalls to avoid, hence the standards being shaped the way they are. And so, by understanding how closely you align to the standards, it also helps you to give you a good health check as to whether you will or will not be running into a particular challenge that may come further down the line. And so, a lot of organizations benefit from this because by establishing your basic or your baseline infrastructure, processes, techniques, platforms, etc., will then give you a couple of decision points. And at that point, if you get good advice as to what to avoid and what to leverage for what you've established, then that just gives you a great input as an objective assessment as to where and how you can continue with the program and get the best out of it. So it's a fairly comprehensive set of conversations to be had in styles of workshops, interviews, and documentation review as well. But we do favor the conversations as a method because the in conversation, several topics may be raised or further questions will allow us to do so. So we will start that review by simply looking at those components. Yeah.
And I would imagine you can often get a different point of view or a different perspective depending upon who it is you're talking to, whether it be someone who's on the ground implementing Data Vault versus one of the downstream users of the resulting data from the vault. Yes.
Absolutely. Because there's obviously technical challenges, there are perception elements that needs to be unpacked, there needs to be sort of the realities of things are always an interesting challenge to have a look at. And so we look at all of those different aspects.
Excellent. So we know that Data Vault, commonly a lot of people mistake Data Vault for just being the model and the modeling of the data. But from our experience, obviously, some of the challenges people face is by not adhering to some of the principles and practices within the methodology. So, from your perspective, what is covered in the review in order to make sure that we understand, all the aspects of where there are opportunities to improve?
We focus specifically in on the three major pillars of the data vault methodology. So we do look at the model, yes, but we also look very specifically at the architecture and supporting platforms, and very specifically at the methodology components, where we look at what is the practices, the patterns, the approaches, the implementation elements that are involved in building out a data vault platform, because we need to understand that the methodology drives the how you do about it. The uh, architecture allows you what facilitates you doing your work, and the model is essentially just giving you a backdrop or a framework that enables the patterns of information, which is basically your business keys, relationships, and descriptive details. So, not looking in and focusing on those components of information is where the strength and the repeatability, the scale and acceleration of data vault is realized, is allowing those patterns to manifest itself in not just the model, but in the architecture and also in the methodology and implementation. So those elements are what shapes the review and guides the review conversations. When we're looking at, for instance, your architecture in more detail, we'll look at your physical architectures, the storage architectures, the orchestration architectures, the process architectures, your deployment architectures for CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment type efforts, and even the test architecture and platform support that goes across that. So we will find that these themes repeat themselves in the different pillars. So architecture we've covered off, and the methodology is going to be similarly shaped by understanding what does the team look like, what is the roles that they perform, what is the structures that they operate in, how do we facilitate the agile practices, how do we embrace things like test-driven development and so on when it comes to the agile practices to guide essentially the team in how they go about building and working and implementing. And of course, the model, we look at the standards. Is a hub still a hub? Is a link still a link? Are we still capturing the right things in the satellites, etc.? And then, of course, it's not just about the inflow, but also the consumption out of your data vault that gets a similar review. Uh, oh, and so, particularly, we'll go through and look at, are you leveraging, if you're having performance issues, are you leveraging point in time and bridge tables? If you have flexibility issues, are you still keeping your information mounts virtual as long as possible? So there are a number of things. Are you using rapid prototyping? Coming back to the methodology side, even in the consumption part, are you using rapid prototyping to engage with your business and verify and enumerate all of your requirements succinctly? So all of these elements
Mm.
play into it during the review. So it's great if the review includes the actual business sponsors or consumers. In fact, that's what we would love to happen every single time. Sometimes that is politically tough, but more often than not, the conversations with the end users are very illuminating in that it's not trying to uh, cast any aspersions anywhere. It's simply saying what is their experience, because their experience would indicate potential places for remediation. And so that's the conversation from acquisition all the way through to consumption is covered. And then of the
Great.
last but not least element is governance and how that actually ties into your metadata management and working and what your management practices are. Do you have a forum that enables you to engage with the business but also drive out consistency, and how do you support that? Do you have a business glossary? Do you have lineage enabled? Because most organizations these days are subject to some sort of regulatory framework, and in Australia, the regulatory expectations are extremely clear from an APRA perspective. So those governance, metadata, lineage elements must be embraced along with the good practices that goes with a data vault.
Excellent, a fairly comprehensive approach. You mentioned that the obviously the downstream users, and we know that any effective data strategy has to be driven by the business strategy. Is the review purely a point in time looking back at where you're at today, or is there a forward looking view as well as what future requirements may look like?
Excellent question. Obviously, the first baseline of the review does take the what has happened perspective well and truly in mind. But in forming up the recommendations, it would be neglect from our part if we did not consider any strategic direction or any strategic inputs that may be available to the organization. And even if there's a lack of strategy as such, being able to point out that it would benefit from a clear strategy in due course. Uh, Obviously, strategy will impact the type of architectures, the type of processes that you need to embrace, considering that modeling is essentially focusing on the information and the information assets. That doesn't change all that much because the standard for that has been established well and truly. But your way of working, your methodology may change if you're going through mergers and acquisitions, or if you are uh, uh, working on a decentralized model. The specifics associated to the ways of working and the agile practices that apply may vary depending on the actual organizational strategy. So that does have a significant bearing on where uh, the platform and the approach the warehouse is heading. So absolutely, that is an excellent input into the overall considerations.
Great. So, obviously, there's a lot of people who are building or about to build their first data vault. When would you say would be the best time, or indeed times, to conduct a review?
That's an excellent question. Um, I'm going to preface this that if this is your first go at it, uh, yes,
Mhm.
you will may be able to make it go and do quite well. We've had quite a few of our clients go through the training at minimum, had a go at it, did very well out of it, but then ran into a couple of challenges. So along the way, uh, uh, encourage you to get some training. If you can, get a good
Mhm.
mentor, because that just shortcuts the amount of time that you take in establishing a platform. Once you've established a platform and processes and supporting architectures as such, whether that's with or without mentoring, doesn't matter. Uh, Once you're into your second or third iteration, at that point, it may be an excellent time to do a health check. Or if this is now,
Mhm.
say, 18 months or 2 years down the line with a fair substantive piece of work already behind you, uh, just ensuring that you're still on the right track means uh, would benefit from a potential review, even though it's a little bit longer in the tooth as far as the programs are concerned, particularly if you're introducing new sources with particular challenges or new technologies are coming on the horizon. Those may be all different triggers as to whether it's appropriate to come and do a review of your data vault. Like you should do, even if it's not a data vault warehouse, do a regular health check on what your data warehouse is delivering on or not. And so that's very important because you may have great initial engagement, but if that tapers off, then that may be a red flag, and so on. So therein
Yeah.
lies the crux of it. If you have a warehouse and no one's using it, you have a problem. And it's not necessarily a technology or approach problem, it's an engagement problem. So some of those insights are also part of the conversations that we have in as far as particularly engagement is concerned with the business or the sponsor or uh, the champion within the organization for that
Yeah.
the business owner effectively of
Yeah.
the
It seems very clear that there's always something new and shiny coming down the line. I mean, there's lots of conversations now around the model of a data lakehouse or use of data virtualization. Data mesh is now seems to be the darling of the convention scene, and of course, AI is now very much a part of our daily dialogue. And so, I think. you're right, doing a regular review to make sure that the existing data management platform, Data Vault or not, in fact, yeah, is still going to support not only existing requirements but is ready to meet the challenges of the future. So when someone's done a Data Vault review, what do they actually walk away with? When you've done your thing, what are they going to get in their hands, and how could they, what's they going to look like, and how would they use it?
The elements that you will be benefiting of is there will be a set of pros and cons that will be produced. There's a comprehensive analysis with all of the issues identified, and then recommendations to each one of the particular challenges that may be identified, whether that's strategic, tactical, platform, modeling, or process or team associated challenges. Whichever issues are identified during the combinations of workshops, interviews, and documentation reviews, uh, that will form part and parcel of the overall recommendation. So you would be typically will have an executive summary presentation pack produced as part of the review, and also a detailed analysis and outcomes document that gives you detailed discussion on each one of the issues identified, and then the subsequent recommendations and pathway to remediate. Uh, if there is the possibility to include, with input from the appropriate organization asking for review, a draft implementation plan or a set of priorities are produced in which to help shape the planning and program of work in the near future. That's obviously very much dependent on the conversations with the organization, because there's always budgetary constraints, political constraints, or whatever the case may be. So we need to be cognizant of that. And so a draft roadmap suggestion is also typically. So you typically have those three artifacts that come out of a review. An executive summary, a detailed analysis document and recommendations, and then a rough roadmap of which elements to address first, because there's always high priority issues versus medium and low priority issues. And so that helps to shape the program of work and may then be an input to internal funding conversations as appropriate.
Oh yes, if only we had unlimited budget and resources available. I'm pleased you called out context, because quite often, yeah, that's an essential ingredient into all of these discussions. Is best practice is best practice, but not everybody has unlimited means, and so putting it in the context of current capabilities, current budget, industry pressures, and the like is obviously a very useful thing. Now, you've conducted quite a few of these reviews over the last few years, so I couldn't let you go today without trying to pick your brains a bit on, what do you see as some of the common things that come up in these reviews that, if people were aware of them, they could maybe preempt some of these challenges now.
I'll sort of classify those type of challenges in, yeah, as a backdrop. Let's use the pillars as a backdrop. From an architectural perspective,
Sure.
we find that test and test automation is a challenge that a lot of organizations have issues with. And that's not surprising. Testing can be quite an arduous process, but again, we benefit from the components or the standardized patterns of Data Vault, even for our prodigal child business rules and where and how to implement those. Those are clearly elements that needs to be supported. And so, from a platform and architecture perspective, those are some of the challenges we see from a sort of a category perspective that are quite typical. So, business
Mm,
rules, where and how to apply them, is very frequently an in depth
mm,
conversation. It is still something that is as not necessarily as well understood, but as well managed as it could be. So, business rules is a clear recurring theme. Testing are clear recurring themes from a platform and architecture perspective. Most organizations do not really struggle with their actual storage or processing platforms, because most of the modern cloud-based infrastructures do lend themselves to deliver on the features and functionality that's required. More often than not, um, it's more a case of dealing with the nuances of the technology that may be a slight challenge, performance and tuning, those type of things. But typically, that is not as often a issue. From a methodology, how do you go about doing this stuff? And engaging with the business. We still see that engaging with the business remains a challenge. So, some of the good practices associated with agile, test driven development, rapid prototyping, those type of things are not necessarily leveraged as frequently or as often as would be ideal. And so, engaging with the business, maintaining that, maintaining visibility of delivery, uh, those are the areas where we typically observe some challenges and which are fairly easily remediated, but it's just, you know, keep agile well and truly in focus as far as the principles. Make sure you deliver on those. Your flavor may be different. That's okay. It's whether you've addressed the principles that becomes a interesting one. From a modeling perspective, we do sometimes see some interesting design or standards that are being introduced as part of Data Vault, but those are fairly straightforward to address, particularly if an automation framework or platform is leveraged. And that's one of the other platform elements that we do look at. Do you have an automation framework? Because I don't know about you, I don't think there's quite a few people that would be excited about yet writing yet another generic ETL routine. And so as we're also seeing from industry analysts like Gartner, that from a data vault perspective, the organizations that do not embrace automation in due course have a higher likelihood of failure. So we do need to we do have a specific look at those type of things. So we have the patterns, we have the way of enabling automation. Is automation embraced? And that's not just about the modeling and the deployment modeling. It's also about deployment. It's also about scheduling or orchestration, automation. It's also about the automated testing. And so all of these automation opportunities do form part of the conversation in due time.
Yeah, I know. We were co-sponsors on a report recently into a piece of research around Data Vault, and it's very clear that those people who are classified as best in class when it comes to use of data and analytics, very clearly using automation very well, and for the most part using tools that are available in market rather than becoming a software shop and trying to build their own automation platforms. I think the number of tools that are available out there, their proven technology, they're in line with Data Vault practices, makes it kind of a no brainer, right?
It does, and it's one of those enabling factors that really shines in the automation framework. We don't have time to respond to the plethora of changes coming down the pipeline. The business is moving tremendously at a tremendous pace. The rate of change has only ramped up, and it's not going to slow down. And so. Any bespoke development becomes problematic because it's not able to scale or keep up with the rate of change. And so being able to meet the business and maintain the business requirements and the delivery that is demanded through that rate of change, because as the business change, they need to respond to the market. If we cannot respond in our platform to the same rate of change, um, you will find the
Yeah.
business will find a way, and they will have some sort of skunk works or shadow IT function or any of those type of things because the platform couldn't respond in time. So the fact that we don't have time or spare time or a lot of time to respond to change has really put a laser focus on your ability to deliver. And automation is a key enabler to all of that response
Yeah.
to the change flowing through in the organization.
Awesome. So, well, look, Knowles, thank you so much for making the time today. Um, it's been, I hope, an informative session for everybody. Obviously, if you have a data vault or about to build a data vault, and you're interested to understand more about how the data vault review process works, please let us know. Um, we often try and provide this as a service at a fixed cost, so you know going in exactly what it will be. I think it takes us, about 12 days of effort to come in and get everything that we need, and then a bit of time to produce the report. So it's definitely something that can be turned around quickly, and a very useful tool in planning, where you want to go and making sure that you're minimizing your technical debt with your current Data Vault implementation. So thank you for joining us. And once again, Knowles, thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.